Why are some of the most powerful cartel leaders willing to kill their own members? Cartel leaders like El Mencho and La Barbie didn't just fight enemies. They executed their own men on video for showing even a hint of disloyalty. Here's the dark truth they don't want you to know. El Mencho, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho, leads one of Mexico's most violent cartels, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, also known as CJNG. Under his command, CJNG has become infamous for its use of terror as a weapon, with the cartel regularly filming its executions. One of the most brutal incidents occurred in a forest, where CJNG members were shown beheading several individuals accused of betrayal. Their severed heads were later displayed as a gruesome warning to rivals and would-be defectors. El Mencho's CJNG is particularly experienced at using social media to circulate these chilling videos, a calculated move designed to strike fear into anyone who dares to oppose him. His methods are often cruel and calculated, as seen in one video from Zacatecas, where a rival hitman from Mayo Zambada's faction was burned alive. The screams and the cold, detached demeanor of the CJNG members highlight the cartel's brutality. El Mencho has been ruthless in his approach, targeting not just enemies but even his own men should they show any signs of disloyalty. Under El Mencho's reign, the CJNG has grown into one of the most feared and powerful drug cartels in Mexico. While El Mencho's calculated cruelty terrorized Mexico, he was not the only cartel leader to show extreme violence. Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, better known as Z40, took brutality to another level under his command of Los Zetas. Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, known as Z40, Miguel Angel Trevino Morales stands as one of the most brutal figures in cartel history. Under his leadership, Los Zetas gained a reputation for their extreme violence. Perhaps the most infamous method of execution associated with Trevino is the stew, El Guiso, where captives were cooked alive in oil drums. Trevino's cruelty didn't end with enemies. His own men weren't safe from his wrath. He executed those he suspected of betrayal, often through dismemberment on camera. These brutal videos were psychologically crafted to dehumanize both victim and viewer. One such video showed members being forced to confess to their supposed disloyalty before being torn apart piece by piece. Trevino's relentless brutality cemented Los Zetas' status as one of Mexico's most feared cartels. Under his leadership, the cartel expanded its reach beyond drug operations, getting involved in kidnapping and extortion. Trevino ruled through fear, using filmed executions to ensure the name Los Zetas would strike fear in both civilians and rivals. Following Trevino's reign of terror, another figure, Edgar Valdez Villarreal, or La Barbie, showcased his own brand of cold-blooded violence through chilling execution videos. La Barbie. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, better known as La Barbie, brought a chilling level of cold-bloodedness to his role as a cartel leader. A former American football player, La Barbie rose through the ranks of the Beltran Leyva cartel, becoming infamous for his sadistic approach to violence. His execution videos often featured captured enemies being forced to confess on camera before their brutal deaths. La Barbie's demeanor during these videos is particularly chilling. While his victims were tortured, he would remain calm, almost detached, as if the violence was a casual part of his daily routine. This level of calculated cruelty sent a powerful message, not just to rivals, but to his own cartel members. The message was clear: betrayal or failure would be met with horrifying consequences. La Barbie was not just violent, he was methodical. His control over the cartel and its operations was rooted in his ability to inspire fear through these acts of public brutality. By filming the deaths of his enemies, he ensured that his reputation for ruthlessness would precede him wherever he went. His sadistic methods created an aura of invincibility around him, but it was this very brutality that would ultimately lead to his downfall. La Barbie's cold demeanor was matched by Heriberto Lascano, the former elite soldier whose military precision and psychological tactics amplified the fear within Los Zetas. Heriberto Lascano. A former elite soldier turned cartel boss, Heriberto Lascano, also known as El Lasca, brought military precision and psychological warfare to his role as leader of Los Zetas. Lascano's brutal tactics were legendary, and videos emerged showing him personally torturing and executing defectors and rivals. One particularly gruesome method involved carving the faces of his victims, a stark reminder of the consequences of disloyalty. Lascano's military background deeply influenced his approach to violence. His executions were not just random acts of brutality, they were part of a calculated strategy to maintain control over his cartel. By filming these horrific acts and making the footage public, Lascano ensured that fear would permeate every level of his organization. The message was clear: disobedience or betrayal would be met with the most gruesome of punishments. Under Lascano, Los Zetas became known for extreme violence. His military precision made the cartel efficient, but it was his use of psychological terror that set him apart. Lascano controlled both enemies and his own soldiers through fear, ensuring unwavering loyalty. Lascano Chicano's military methods helped maintain control, but Alfredo Beltran Leiva's brutal purges within his cartel showed that sheer violence was another way to assert dominance. Alfredo Beltran Leiva. The Beltran Leiva cartel, once part of the powerful Sinaloa cartel, became known for its brutal purges under the leadership of Alfredo Beltran Leiva, also known as El Mochimo. Allegations of betrayal within the cartel were met with swift and violent retribution, and many of these executions were filmed as a stark reminder to others within the organization. The videos often showed cartel members accused of disloyalty being executed in horrific ways, with the footage shared widely to send a message to anyone considering crossing the cartel. These brutal purges were not only meant to eliminate threats, but to reinforce the cartel's reputation for ruthless efficiency. By making these executions public, Alfredo ensured that his power remained unquestioned within the cartel. Alfredo's rule within the cartel was defined by both violence and strategy. By using filmed executions, he created a culture of fear that kept his organization in check, even as rivals and law enforcement closed in. His control was absolute, with anyone who challenged him facing a grim fate for all to witness. After Alfredo Beltran Leiva's brutal purges solidified his grip on power, Ociel Cardenas Guillen of the Gulf Cartel took similar steps, using extreme violence and public executions to maintain control over his organization and instill fear in both rivals and his own members. Ociel Cardenas Guillen. As the brutal leader of the Gulf Cartel, Ociel Cardenas Guillen was notorious for his violent tactics, not only against rival cartels, but within his own ranks as well. Rising to power in the late 1990s, Cardenas Guillen transformed the Gulf Cartel into one of Mexico's most feared organizations by forming close ties with Los Zetas, who became his enforcement arm. His rule was marked by ruthless violence, and he did not hesitate to publicly execute those he deemed disloyal. Cardenas Guillen was one of the first to use filmed executions to spread fear. He ordered the torture and killing of suspected traitors, with many incidents recorded and shared. These videos sent a clear message to both allies and enemies. Loyalty was mandatory, and any hint of betrayal would face the harshest consequences. One particularly infamous case involved the execution of several Gulf Cartel members who were suspected of cooperating with rival organizations. The video, which showed the men being shot and then beheaded, was circulated widely within the cartel private groups, ensuring that the consequences of betrayal were known to everyone. These brutal tactics allowed Cardenas Guillen to maintain a tight grip on his organization, keeping potential traitors in check through sheer terror. While Cardenas Guillen capitalized on brutal spectacle, Carlos Rosales Mendoza of Los Viagras relied on similar tactics, using gruesome beheadings to control both enemies and allies. Carlos Rosales Mendoza. Carlos Rosales Mendoza, leader of Los Viagras, a splinter group operating in Michoacan, may not have commanded a cartel as large as the CJANG or Sinaloa cartel, but his brutality matched the most violent cartel leaders in Mexico. Like many cartel leaders, he used fear to control enemies and his own members. Videos emerged of Los Viagras executing captured rivals, often through beheadings, with chilling footage highlighting the victims' terrified faces before their deaths. These videos circulated within cartel networks, serving as warnings to rivals and potential defectors. Rosales Mendoza also dealt harshly with his own men, executing those suspected of betrayal. Members accused of disloyalty were often filmed confessing their alleged crimes before facing brutal consequences. By publicizing these executions, Rosales Mendoza ensured that no one within his organization would challenge his authority. Despite the smaller size of Los Viagras, his use of violence and public spectacle allowed him to maintain power and influence in Mexico's fragmented cartel landscape. Rosales Mendoza's smaller cartel demonstrated that size did not matter when it came to brutality, something that Ismael Zambada, co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, also understood as he deployed recorded violence to maintain his reign. Ismael Zambada. One of the most enigmatic figures in the world of Mexican cartels, Ismael El Mayo Zambada is a co-founder and current leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Despite his preference for maintaining a lower profile compared to other notorious figures like El Chapo, Zambada has not shied away from using extreme violence when necessary to maintain control and eliminate threats. His leadership has been marked by a calculated use of force, with a focus on balance between strategic alliances and brutal retaliation when betrayed. Under Zambada's reign, the Sinaloa cartel has also embraced the use of video-recorded executions as a tool for control. Though Zambada tends to operate more discreetly, there have been several cases where members of his cartel filmed executions of traitors or rival cartel members. These videos, often posted online, serve not only as a warning to those who would challenge the cartel's authority, but also as a way to assert dominance over rival organizations. One particularly brutal incident involved the execution of several defectors in Zacatecas, where Zambada's men forced the traitors traitors to kneel before executing them with gunfire. The video of this execution was circulated widely, ensuring that anyone thinking of betraying the Sinaloa cartel would reconsider. Though Zambada's use of fear was more strategic, Dairo Antonio Usuga David, leader of Colombia's Gulf Clan, amplified the terror with relentless video executions aimed at defectors. Dairo Antonio Usuga David. Dairo Antonio Usuga David, better known as Otoniel, is the leader of Colombia's Gulf Clan, one of the largest and most powerful criminal organizations in the country. His reign has been characterized by extreme violence, much of which has been captured on camera. Under Otoniel's command, the Gulf Clan has waged a brutal campaign of terror against rivals, law enforcement, and even its own members suspected of betrayal. The cartel has released numerous videos of violent executions, often targeting defectors or enemies threatening his control. One notorious video depicted Gulf Clan members executing bound and gagged defectors, shot one by one. This footage circulated widely in Colombia and beyond, reinforcing the Gulf Clan's ruthless reputation. Otoniel strategically used these videos to maintain discipline within his organization and intimidate other criminal groups and law enforcement. The brutality of the executions, often involving beheadings or extended torture, sent a clear message. Otoniel's control was absolute, and any challenge to his authority would face swift and merciless consequences. As Otoniel ruled with terror, Francisco Javier Arellano Felix continued the Tijuana cartel's violent legacy, making sure that traitors were dealt with in similarly brutal fashion. Francisco Javier Arellano Felix. As one of the leaders of the Tijuana cartel, Francisco Javier Arellano Felix was no stranger to violence. The Arellano Felix brothers had long established a reputation for ruthlessness, and Francisco continued this legacy through his brutal leadership. Known for orchestrating public executions of rivals and traitors, Francisco utilized filmed killings as a powerful tool of intimidation, ensuring that his control over the cartel remained uncontested during times of internal strife and external pressure. The Tijuana cartel, under Francisco's direction, was particularly notorious for filming the executions of its members who were suspected of disloyalty. In one of the more infamous videos, cartel members are seen interrogating a suspected traitor who is later executed by beheading. The video was shared across criminal networks and leaked online, serving as a stark warning to anyone who might consider betraying the cartel. These acts of violence were designed to both punish and publicly humiliate the victims, making an example of them to deter others from following in their footsteps. Arellano Felix's ruthless methods were exactly mirrored by Vicente Carrillo Fuentes of the Juarez cartel, who used film torture to eliminate both internal and external threats. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes. Taking control of the Juarez cartel after his brother Amado Carrillo Fuentes' death, Vicente Carrillo Fuentes faced immediate challenges from both rivals and internal factions. His brother Amado, also known as El Señor de los Cielos, had built a drug empire based on smuggling vast quantities of cocaine into the U.S., but Vicente's leadership would soon be marked by extreme violence, particularly against suspected traitors within the cartel. Vicente's consolidation of power was rooted in public displays of brutality. To eliminate any doubt about his authority, he ordered the execution of several key members of the Juarez cartel suspected of conspiring against him. These executions were filmed and distributed to convey a clear message. Betrayal would result in death, and no one was safe from Vicente's wrath. In one particularly chilling video, cartel members are seen torturing and beheading suspected traitors, a terrifying demonstration designed to ensure that no one within the organization would dare challenge his leadership. The Juarez cartel under Vicente also targeted external rivals, often recording their brutal executions as part of psychological warfare. This tactic not only cemented Vicente's control, but also helped maintain the cartel's reputation as one of the most violent and feared organizations in Mexico. Vicente's brutal leadership was reminiscent of Rafael Caro Quintero's earlier tactics, which laid the groundwork for cartel violence, even though videos were less prevalent during Quintero's era. Rafael Caro Quintero. One of the most infamous figures in Mexico's drug trade history, Rafael Caro Quintero was a founding member of the Guadalajara Cartel, one of the first major drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. Though his rise to power took place in the 1980s, Caro Quintero's brutal enforcement tactics set the stage for the violence that would come to define cartel operations in the decades that followed. He was known for his violent methods of maintaining control, which included public executions and severe punishment for those suspected of betrayal. While not as known for releasing groundbreaking videos as some of his successors in the cartel world, Caro Quintero's actions laid the foundation for the culture of brutality and fear that followed. He frequently used violent executions as a way to maintain discipline within the Guadalajara cartel and to send a message to rivals. Suspected traitors within his organization were often executed in grisly fashion, with these killings serving as a clear warning to others. In one chilling account, it was reported that Caro Quintero personally oversaw the torture and murder of a cartel member who had attempted to cooperate with law enforcement, using extreme violence as a deterrent to potential informants. Caro Quintero's most infamous act of violence was the kidnapping, torture, and murder of U.S. DEA agent Camarena in 1985. Though this act wasn't filmed, it was a bold and brutal display of his willingness to take on anyone, including foreign law enforcement, to protect his cartel. Caro Quintero's legacy of violence set the stage for future cartel leaders, including Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who made selective use of filmed executions to maintain control over his sprawling empire. El Chapo. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the most infamous drug lords in modern history, led the Sinaloa cartel with a mix of cunning business acumen and ruthless violence. While he is best known for his audacious prison escapes and his dominance over Mexico's drug trade, El Chapo's rule was also marked by a willingness to employ brutal violence when needed. He understood that in the world of drug cartels, fear was a powerful tool, and like many of his peers, he used filmed executions as a means to control both rivals and his own cartel members. Under El Chapo's leadership, the Sinaloa cartel strategically used recorded executions to convey a message. While he is often seen as more discreet than leaders like El Mencho, there were still many instances of cartel members being executed on camera, particularly those suspected of betrayal. One notorious incident involved the execution of several men accused of collaborating with rival cartels. The video, which circulated online, showed the captives being interrogated before facing execution. These displays of extreme violence were a calculated reminder that loyalty was crucial, and betrayal would lead to a grim fate. Though El Chapo's violent rule grabbed headlines, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, maintained his own reign of terror, with executions carried out more quietly but no less brutally. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Before his brother Vicente Carrillo Fuentes took control of the Juarez cartel, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, better known as El Señor de los Cielos, Lord of the Skies, was the kingpin of the cartel and one of the most powerful drug lords in Mexican history. While Amado is primarily remembered for his innovative use of cargo planes to transport cocaine across international borders, his leadership also involved a calculated use of violence to maintain his vast empire. Although Amado Carrillo Fuentes was less overtly violent than other cartel leaders, reports indicate that he also sanctioned the filming of brutal executions to maintain order within his cartel. While these videos were not as widely circulated as those from other groups, they served a specific purpose: enforcing discipline among members. Amado was known to authorize the torture and execution of those who disappointed him, with some accounts suggesting these killings were filmed to clearly communicate that failure or betrayal would not be tolerated. Amado's ability to balance strategic violence with a lower public profile allowed him to maintain control over one of the most lucrative drug trafficking networks in the world. His leadership was marked by a blend of discretion and terror, a combination that enabled the Juarez cartel to thrive during his reign. Carrillo Fuentes' calculated approach to violence was similar to that of Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela of the Cali cartel, whose corporate-style cartel still employed extreme measures to maintain discipline. Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela. Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela, one of the co-founders of Colombia's Cali cartel, took a more business-like approach to the drug trade compared to his contemporaries in Mexico. Along with his brother Miguel, Gilberto built the Cali cartel into a well-oiled drug trafficking machine that rivaled Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel in power and influence. While the Cali cartel is often remembered for its more corporate style of management, there were still instances where Gilberto employed extreme violence, including recorded executions, to ensure loyalty and eliminate internal threats. The Cali cartel's approach to violence was often more subtle than that of other organizations, but the Rodriguez brothers did not hesitate to employ brutal methods when necessary. There were documented cases of Cali cartel members suspected of betrayal being executed on camera. Although these videos were less flamboyant than those from Mexican cartels, they served the same purpose, reminding everyone within the organization that disloyalty would not be tolerated. One notable incident involved the execution of operatives suspected of cooperating with law enforcement, with the footage shared internally as a stark warning to others. What set Gilberto apart was his ability to combine calculated violence with a business-like approach to the drug trade, creating a powerful and disciplined organization. While Rodriguez Orihuela mixed business with violence, Nazario Moreno Gonzalez brought a bizarre blend of religious fanaticism and brutality to his leadership of La Familia Michoacana. Nazario Moreno Gonzalez. Nazario Moreno Gonzalez, also known as El Chayo, or the Craziest One, was a unique figure in the brutal world of Mexican cartels. As the leader of La Familia Michoacana, he combined extreme violence with a strange brand of religious fervor, portraying himself as a spiritual leader guiding his followers through a mix of cartel discipline and quasi-religious rhetoric. Under his leadership, La Familia Michoacana became notorious for executing members and rivals on camera, framing these acts as both punishment and spiritual retribution. Moreno would often justify his cartel's violence through a religious lens, blending his own interpretations of scripture with his ruthless enforcement tactics. In one particularly chilling instance, Moreno orchestrated the execution of several members who were suspected of betraying the cartel. The killings were filmed and distributed among La Familia's ranks as both a punishment and a warning. In these videos, the cartel's executioners would sometimes invoke religious justifications for the killings, claiming that the traitors had sinned against the group's higher purpose and would therefore face divine retribution. Moreno's combination of religious rhetoric and brutal violence gave him an almost cult-like following within La Familia Michoacana. However, the recorded executions were designed to ensure that members remained loyal out of fear rather than faith. The contradiction of using scripture to justify cartel violence was disturbing but effective. Moreno's cult-like violence may have been unique, but Juan Garcia Abrego's ruthless tactics within the Gulf Cartel followed the familiar pattern of extreme brutality to inspire fear and loyalty. Juan Garcia Abrego. As the head of the Gulf Cartel, Juan Garcia Abrego was one of the most influential and feared cartel leaders of his time. Under his leadership, the Gulf Cartel became one of the first Mexican drug trafficking organizations to build direct ties with the Colombian cartels, particularly the Cali Cartel, allowing him to dominate the drug trade routes into the United States during the 1980s and 1990s. But like many cartel leaders, his reign was not only built on strategic alliances, it was also enforced through violence, including the brutal execution of those who were suspected of disloyalty. Garcia Abrego maintained a tight grip on the Gulf Cartel by ensuring that traitors or those perceived as threats were eliminated swiftly and often in the most public and brutal ways possible. There are reports of executions being filmed, although these videos were typically circulated within cartel circles rather than being released publicly. The goal was to create a culture of fear within his organization, ensuring that no one would dare to betray him. One account tells of Garcia Abrego ordering the torture and execution of a high-ranking member who was suspected of cooperating with law enforcement. The video of the killing was reportedly used as a reminder to others that cooperation with authorities would lead to a horrific death. These methods allowed Garcia Abrego to maintain control over his organization for years, even as rival cartels emerged and began to challenge the Gulf Cartel's dominance. His reign ended in 1996 when he was arrested and extradited to the United States. As Garcia Abrego's reign of terror gripped the Gulf Cartel, Diego Montoya Sanchez of the Norte del Valle cartel similarly relied on video executions to control his cocaine empire. Diego Montoya Sanchez. Diego Montoya Sanchez, known as Don Diego, was a key leader of Colombia's Norte del Valle cartel, which rose to prominence in the cocaine trade after the fall of the Medellin and Cali cartels. While primarily recognized for efficient drug trafficking, Montoya's cartel was also notorious for brutal enforcement tactics, particularly executions used to maintain discipline and instill fear among rivals. Under Montoya's leadership, the Norte del Valle cartel executed numerous traitors and rivals on camera, clearly signaling that disloyalty would lead to extreme violence. His approach was methodical and calculated, with videos often showing captured cartel members or rivals being interrogated before their brutal killings. These videos served to enforce internal discipline and acted as psychological warfare against competing cartels. One reported video depicted a group of captured rival members being tortured and shot, intended to demoralize enemies and demonstrate Montoya's dominance in the cocaine trade. Despite his ruthlessness, Montoya evaded law enforcement for years, remaining one of Colombia's most wanted men. His use of violence, including recorded executions, solidified his position at the top of the drug trade. However, his reign ended in 2007 when he was captured and later extradited to the United States. Montoya's cold efficiency in the drug trade was mirrored by Hector Palma, whose violent purges helped solidify the Sinaloa cartel's reputation for brutality. Hector Palma. Hector Palma, one of the founding members of the Sinaloa cartel, was known for his violent purges within the organization. While the Sinaloa cartel is often associated with figures like El Chapo, Guzman Palma was instrumental in establishing the cartel's early operations and maintaining its discipline through brutal means. His tenure as a leader was marked by violent retribution against those he perceived as disloyal or as threats to his power. In many cases, these acts of violence were recorded and used to maintain control over the cartel's sprawling network. One particularly infamous infamous incident involved the execution of a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel who was suspected of betraying Palma. Palma was known for his willingness to eliminate anyone, friend or foe, who posed a threat to the cartel's operations, often carrying out these killings personally or overseeing them to ensure they were carried out with maximum brutality. Palma's violent leadership style contributed to the Sinaloa cartel's reputation for ruthlessness, a reputation that has endured to this day. His use of filmed executions was part of a broader strategy of using fear to maintain internal control, ensuring that no one dared to cross him or the organization. Despite Palma's vicious leadership, it was Enadina Arellano Felix who introduced a more business-oriented approach to the Tijuana cartel while still upholding its legacy of filmed executions. Enadina Arellano Felix. Enadina Arellano Felix, the matriarch of the notorious Tijuana cartel, holds a unique position among cartel leaders. While many of her brothers became infamous for their open brutality and public displays of violence, Enadina was known for her more discreet and business-oriented approach to running the cartel. One of the more notable aspects of Enadina's leadership was her ability to maintain control over the cartel during periods of internal strife. When her brothers were either killed or arrested, Enadina took on a more active role in the organization. Despite her reputation as a businesswoman of the cartel world, there were still instances where the Tijuana cartel resorted to violent purges. Several high-ranking members suspected of disloyalty were executed, and some of these killings were filmed, sending a message that the cartel's power remained intact despite leadership transitions. These filmed executions, while less frequent under Enadina's rule, were still used strategically. Enadina's ability to blend brutal enforcement with a more business-like approach helped the Tijuana cartel survive through challenging times. These stories show the harsh truth about cartel leaders who betrayed their own, using fear and violence to keep control. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.